Are you looking to sit in a dark room and discuss to yourself whether or not life or what life is? There's philosophy books for that. But today, we're talking about what those books actually tell us. Sitting in a dark room sounds nice, right?
It really does.
Um, Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Books, Banter, and Beyond. Today, we are talking about the semi truth, the possible truth, or I guess the individual truth between or behind philosophy books. Um, and the funny part is, to start this off, philosophy never actually agrees with itself. And that's the point. For anybody who's ever studied philosophy or philosophical teachings, you'll know that philosophy isn't a one set do it all thing. It's purposely made to be choice, I guess is the best word.
Okay.
Unlike a study like science or history, there is no core specific. It's kind of like here's the idea, use it as you will.
And then
Um,
everyone debates, and then all these philosophers they debate their
right.
ideas, right?
And some of them, for instance, Plato argued that he argued for objective forms and absolute truths, whereas people like Nietzsche rejected universal morality and warned against inherited values. So you have two very different parts of the spectrum in the same exact study. And instead of resolving any of these questions, you're basically asking more. So the answer to your question is a question,
Is a
and
question.
it just kind of continues in that
I don't know
spiral.
about you, Rob. That's frustrating to me. It's like,
So I'll give you a little back. So the reason why this one came to mind was I finished a book, and it was a father and son. The son grew up in Europe under kind of the Catholic studies, but then ended up switching to becoming a monk later in life. His father, who at the time was slightly confused to what was going on because he himself never learned, the study of Buddhism and all that stuff, came to him and said, "Hey, let's have a discussion, not as family, but just as two people with two different views of basically life." And the entire book was very interesting because while neither of them necessarily were on the same page, they were in the fact of they both understood this was the viewpoints of how they were doing what they were doing. So
mm,
the father would ask the son about Buddhist practices, and then the son would ask the father how that compared to European culture and stuff like that as well.
all right.
Um, Philosophers like Ludwig Wittgenstein, apologies to him, argue that philosophy doesn't solve anything as much as it kind of clarifies how much everything confuses us.
Well,
So
there you
again, philosophy is basically that. So why do you think that we never reach an answer in philosophy? I kind of have a thought
go. Okay, well then you're
of
gonna have
it.
to share it. I don't have a clue.
So reading Plato, reading people of that sort, it makes you start to realize that unlike a core like a science, you're never meant to go into the study to actually figure it out. You're meant to figure you out. So when somebody says, the philosophy of life is X, Y, and Z, it's then up to you to use X, Y, and Z.
So are you saying, Rob, that it's an ever-changing thing, that philosophy that might have meaning to us right now in a particular way, maybe that's going to change as
I
other
mean,
philosophers discuss?
look, from the readings I've seen and from what I've looked at, the answer is pretty much yes. It's less a matter of perspective and more a matter of the fun part. The what should be fun of philosophy is the fact you continuously get to ask these questions.
Hmm.
But like you mentioned at the beginning, for those who aren't prone to the study, it seems more tedious than it does enjoyment.
And so
So.
So would you say that some people will have an affinity to certain philosophers because they touch them in certain ways, and other philosophers that they don't relate, or
Most definitely, and I think more so now, because if you think about what life was back in the times of these philosophers, a lot of this was looked at as kind of paranormal-esque because it didn't follow the rules of, let's say, the religion or the culture at the time.
Mhm.
So anybody who was in government or anybody who was in religion would look at these philosophers and go, "This is this is a little weird, and we don't necessarily want to do this because it doesn't make sense overall." Now, in the newer centuries, people can go back and go, okay, this individual says this, doesn't really follow with my personal, but this individual says this. I think I can get behind that. So, more so recently, people can pick and choose what they feel fits their lifestyle versus somebody else's. Yeah, so philosophy books teach self interrogation, not doctrine. And that's a very good way to put it. Philosophy books don't tell you how, they tell you why, as cliche as that might sound. They are structured to provoke discomfort in a way in terms of not understanding, but again, it's to provide that knowledge. So, for instance, Socrates famously claimed wisdom begins with knowing one's ignorance and using questions to go about figuring out what it is. So, instead of having to have the answer, people like him would say, you don't want the answer. You want to have the ability and the freedom to go, wait a minute, that doesn't sound, you know. Simone de Beauvoir argued that philosophy forces individuals to confront responsibility, again, something that you don't necessarily want to do, rather than hide behind the rules. So instead of having the system of rules, it's more of, okay, when you get up in the morning, what is your responsibility to do that day for you? What is it that you're doing to continue your
that makes sense. That totally makes sense.
yeah, so a lot of philosophy does go down to the crux of you're doing it to further your being rather than following a step by step. So I know you haven't read a lot, but a question that I thought, about was, has any reader out there read a philosophy book and realized more about yourself than the author? And I can say from what I have, you do get that feeling. Yes, you obviously are learning about what the author is saying and you get to learn about them as a person, but you also realize how common thought, I guess, they have in terms of you as an individual,
Right.
right?
And it feels personal. It really does feel personal. I think we all interpret it in our own way, right? So totally.
So, what is the real meaning of it? So, modern philosophers and educators argue that the value of philosophy lies in the interpretation and strictly that. And again, it goes back to what we were saying, whether it's somebody like Socrates saying, what did we just do? Wisdom begins with knowing the questions, or whether it's something like Plato saying, let's just forget all we know and kind of question society. Either side, it's the ability to interpret what it is you're doing. Another famous one, Jean-Paul Sartre, insisted that meaning is not discovered but created. And this one is one of my favorites right here. Meaning is not necessarily when you open a textbook and you go, oh, hey, this is how a tree grows. Yeah, there are things that obviously you learn that are physically known. But in the case of learning, it's what you create, not what you necessarily read,
And it
per
makes
se.
you think. And it makes you think. A fact is a fact. Well, normally, a fact is a fact. Science is science, right? But philosophy, it makes you think and how you interpret it. So I think it's a totally different animal. And to be honest, Rob, I don't read very many philosophical books. I don't. Maybe it hurts my head. I don't know.
Well, a perfect way to say what you just said is they don't transfer the wisdom, they activate your physical ability to reflect upon it. So, the last question we'll have here, if philosophy means something different to everybody, is that kind of a weaker study? Or does it make the study even that much stronger because everybody has a way to decipher the choice.
I mean, I think it makes it stronger. I think it makes it stronger, personally.
Definitely, I agree. I mean, I think if you have a study where you don't need to have proof per se, but you can decide upon, that just makes that study that much better because it's up to you as the individual to pick and choose what makes sense.
As we always say, and if you hear my dog barking, my dog is talking to the gardener. Um, as we always
Just
say,
having
don't
a philosophical conversation.
very philosophical conversation. And I'm getting scared because they're talking back. All right. So we always like to encourage you to go visit the next chapter, bookstore.shop. After all, this is what this show is all about. Go check it out. These are gently used books. That means somebody else's history, maybe their thoughts, maybe their philosophy has been, I don't know, put in there. But go check it out. There's lots of amazing books and great prices. Any last thoughts, Rob?
It makes you think when you're in college and you get your book and somebody's writing notes in there and you're wondering what this person was doing while writing notes. It makes you think a little bit, right?
It really does. It really does. We'll see you all next week. Bye, everyone.